right, what's going on, everybody, and welcome to UX Design Office Hours. Welcome to all the students who are here live, as well as all of you nice enough to join later on watching this on recording. My name is Dave. I'm your student advisor for both the UX Design and the UX Career Track courses. We have an awesome session in store today because we've got the two rock star UX host mentors with us, Greg Schwartz and Carrie Jacobs. Thank you both, as always, for being part of this. And a super, super special welcome and thank you to Calvin Nisbet, who's here. Calvin is a career coach at Springboard. Calvin's also a good friend of mine, so super cool to get to welcome great people here. And Calvin, thanks for being part of this. You've been here a couple times as a guest, and I think everything I ever hear from students is how much they appreciate it, how much they get from it. A lot of students have a lot of career-minded questions. And so you've always been, sorry guys, we're taking this from the Springboard library today in the office. So special sneak peek behind the scenes at the Springboard office in San Francisco. Added bonus to today's session. But we've got plenty good stuff in store with Calvin. So Calvin, that being said, thank you again for being here and being part of this.
Thanks for inviting me. I always have a great time. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. And yeah, this is an opportunity for any of you students who are here. I encourage you to feel free to unmute your mics. Even in the general question and answer sessions, which we hold, we get a lot of career questions. And so a great opportunity to ask the expert in the field who's been there with students every step of the way as they start to launch their career journey in UX design. So feel free to unmute your mic and jump in. You can also type into the chat box as well, and we can all see your questions there. And also, Greg and Carrie, I'll open it up to you to kick off an interview, ask Calvin some questions, and have a conversation with him as well.
Any students have any questions? I guess, well, let us know when you do.
always slow at the start, and then the rush comes with 5 minutes to go in the session. So, but yeah, Greg or Carrie, if you have any questions on your mind or questions that you think, conversations that you think students would find really helpful, yeah, please feel free to jump in.
So one thing that I often get asked by students is sort of how do you think about going, full-time at a company versus joining a consultancy versus doing on your own? And I'm always telling them, you really don't want to be doing freelance because you're completely alone. But I'm curious to hear some of what your thoughts are on sort of which direction to go in first.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Greg. I actually get that a lot from students as well too, especially early at the stages of their job search, just figuring out, do they want to commit to full time? Do they want to start doing something on their own? And I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I think a lot of people overlook the fact that freelancing isn't something that you can just start in the next morning, be fielding a ton of kind of offers to do work. It's something that is pretty difficult to get into to start, especially in a new field as well. It takes a lot of time to build up some credibility and some validation. Putting everything kind of in place in terms of being able to reach out and prospect and get some clients. And once you've even achieved that, there's this whole other element of actually taking care of that side, doing the business aspect. So I think, on the surface, it looks like a very viable option, but it is actually something that takes a tremendous amount of work just to get to the point of being able to do that. And then from there on, you're not spending 90-95% of your time doing UX work. You might be spending 40-50% of that working on projects and stuff that you enjoy, spending the rest of that marketing, hitting the ground, trying to get some prospects, managing the people that you're working with. So in terms of finding that first job, it could be something, towards looking for full-time, being able to get that under your foot, being able to improve and build and get some experience. And at the same time, start slowly building up that freelance if that's really a long-term goal. Because it does, and I'm sure Carrie and Greg will appreciate and speak to that it does, take at the earliest, probably a good 6-7 months to get that going well at the very earliest. So might as well be getting some experience, building that up and building up your network as well at the same time. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, maybe if you could speak more to maybe joining a design team in-house versus like a agency or consultancy, as well as large company versus startup or things in between, because I get questions about all that as well.
Totally. Yeah. And so yeah, no, totally. So I think there's probably a couple questions in there. And just to, brief, these are all kind of like generalizations, and please feel free to, jump in if anything's kind of different. But I think in terms of, looking at like an organization versus an in-house, agency, there's some pretty big differences on that end. If you're working for, like a Facebook or Google, you're going to be working on one specific product. You're going to own that, whatever that function is, and you're going to work within that team, right? So you're going to be focused on whatever that output is. For the most part, you might have some mobility within that team, or, once you complete a project, you might move elsewhere. But for the most part, you're probably going to be sticking to something similar. Whereas the understanding, I guess, when you're an agency is you may be working on different aspects of different projects. You have a lot of variability. You may spend 3 months working on something, and then that kind of goes on. Something else comes in. So there's a lot of differences in that. You need to be kind of a little more fast-paced, able to adapt. You might have exposure to a number of different duties on that, which is really great. And I know a lot of students want that for their first job. It's just that flexibility and that variability of the task and just building up experience in different avenues. But again, these are massive generalizations, right? You can end up in an agency where you're focused on one specific output and just kind of doing that project by project. And you could be working for companies in-house as well, where you actually are working on a number of different aspects. So a lot of it is kind of, first off assessing where do you want to feel, or where do you want to fit in rather. And then kind of doing, a bit more research on the company, whether that's setting up informational interviews, just doing some digging around, or even just talking to some people actually working on getting a good understanding of like, what's it like to actually work on the team? If you know specifics about this role, can you share that and, what I can be expected on that? So that's how I kind of tackle those two. But again, they're massive generalizations. You're going to get both on both ends. And then the other one in terms of big company versus small company, again, massive generalizations. The idea is, if you're looking at a smaller startup, they don't have the capacity to hire a massive design team or even a design team. You might be one of two or one of the only designers. It should be expected that you're probably doing it all. There's not a lot of help out there if you're the only employee, right? So it's expected that you can come in and at the very least, pick up things very quickly and be able to hit the ground running. Ideally being able to come in and not have to kind of work your way around and figure out a whole bunch of stuff. So those roles are not reserved, but it's probably a little easier when you got a bit of work under your belt and you can come in and feel like you can take ownership of a number of different capacities. Whereas in a bigger company, again, using those kind of Facebook, Google examples, it'd be expected that you're probably going to work on a team. You're going to have a lot of mentorship, a lot of more senior people. So that's a great landing spot to come in for your first role and just feel comfortable. Have a lot of resources to learn. Maybe get great at one specific thing while still having exposure to other things instead of trying to work your way around and feel like you're a jack of all trades in some of the startups. So I don't know if was there any other questions in that? I'm trying to think. I think those were the main two.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Any student questions come up as a result of this so far? Okay, I think maybe I'll just ask you another question that you sort of hinted at when you're talking about informational interviews. So maybe you could talk sort of more about the importance of networking, in the career search or getting into the field, and then how to go about starting networking or how to get into it, and then just tips on when students should start networking, especially those that I guess in the career track, I think it's a little bit more built into the curriculum, but the design track, it's not.
Totally. Yeah, no, great question, great topic. And to give you like a corny answer for the first one or for the last one, it's never too early to start networking. That's always something that we emphasize. If it's not your resume or your portfolio that you can get together, you can still kind of get out there and hit the pavement, start building connections, getting into meetups. So, even if you haven't even started taking the course and you're, looking for the May output, you see a cool meetup, definitely something to go check out and get that going. And I'll kind of come back to that a little bit more, but the importance of informational interviews, I think in the most part is probably twofold. On the one end, you're getting a lot of information that you're not going to have access to elsewhere. You're not going to be able to have that intimate idea of what it's like to work in an organization. They're not putting that on the website. And they're not also selling that in the interview as well, too. So it gives you this great kind of off the books opportunity to go chat with someone, kind of guide the conversation, ask them some things that are important to you, get a good lay of the land, get a good idea of the expectations, and just really get that infinite idea of what's going on there. So that's the one view. The second is also for that validation for job referrals, right? So if you've ever, and I'm sure, Greg and Carrie, you guys have had a chance to look for applicants in applicant tracking systems, and it's a really fun job. But when you're doing that, right, like often you need to find different ways to differentiate yourself. And for our students, when they're coming from different backgrounds, when they're coming from different careers, right, they're not always going to stand out right off the bat. So when you set up informational interviews and you make these connections and you start building relationships, that builds in this validation where people can actually vouch for you. They can go to bat for you, and they're going to feel a lot more comfortable going to bat for someone that they've met, obviously, than someone that they've been reached out to on LinkedIn or never really had a chance to. And that validation can actually sometimes go above what people are seeing on the applicants, right? So if you've got a UX designer, they met an applicant, they're really gung-ho about them and they want to go vouch for them, the HR is probably going to see that a lot more positive than just some people that they've seen apply to these jobs because they've never met them. They don't know if it's worth their time. So that's another great reason to set up these informational interviews, because you can actually target companies that you want to work for and build those connections and get that validation going in there. I'm trying to think of what the next parts for is kind of about getting started networking was the next area. Okay, cool. Again, yeah, a lot of stuff we go through in the career track. So, I mean, if you're on the fence, definitely check it out because we got a lot of great stuff in there. We can go a little more in depth, but one of the easiest ways I think, to get your hands dirty, so to speak, is actually just checking out meetups. Obviously in a lot of big cities, there's going to be UX focused meetups, there's going to be design focused meetups, and even more tech related ones where you can still kind of rub shoulders with people that work in the field or may hire in the field or at least have some great connections, right? So a lot of times we'll talk in our calls, not so much about the first interactions we meet, but who can these people introduce us to as well? That gets you thinking a little more broadly about going to meetups. You're not so UX focused. You can still go to a tech meetup, meet some people, especially in the city that you guys live in. I mean, I know everyone probably knows someone who's a developer or designer or a marketer and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really great opportunity to just start rubbing shoulders with people that you normally wouldn't meet. Aside from that, and I'm sorry if I'm going really quick, I'm trying to get through a bunch of this stuff. Aside from that, you can always just think about the networks that we already have access to. And so one of the other coaches, Marcella, she kind of, showed me this maybe back in August, and it's just a really great tool for assessing what you already have access to. The first one is just like your friends and family, so doing a bit of an audit of, who might have some great connections, who works in the field, who works for some cool companies, and just reaching out to them and seeing who they can have that they can offer or exchange contact with. That's a really great way of just getting it going. The second is your alma mater. All our schools have alumni coordinators, alumni departments. I don't know how good of records they keep in terms of what jobs we're in, but at least they know if there's events going on in your city. And those are really great opportunities to, again, just meet people who maybe don't work in that space, but they can introduce you to other UX designers or people who work at the companies that you're interested in. And then the last one is just kind of like your overall community, right? So just thinking about, if you play pickup basketball, if you go to church, if you volunteer, any other capacity where you're interacting with adults, just thinking about, who might be a valuable connection, who can introduce me to some other people, and just kind of get that going. I could probably go on for like another 20, 30 minutes about different things, but hopefully that'll give people a bit of a start, between meetups, just assessing their other networks, and also just building some spreadsheets too, looking on LinkedIn, looking for people who have interesting backgrounds, interesting career paths, work for companies that you're interested in too. I'd encourage you to kind of put their name down. Think about trying to reach out to them. I'd always try and email versus LinkedIn, just because I know a lot of people don't respond to their LinkedIn messages. Most people will respond to emails, but those are hopefully some tips and strategies to get you going. I don't know.
We've got one in the chat that's any tips, what types of freelance projects are good for a starter or beginner, which has less challenges to start, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure, Greg and Carrie, you guys probably have some insight on this type as well. I think first off, and this is maybe just in terms of response I've got from other students who've tried to do this, and this is not so much on the project side, but more on the person that you're working with. Make sure that they're going to be someone that you're going to be fit with, be comfort fit, and someone who knows what they want. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas right away when you're trying to figure out what is freelancing and UX work. And someone who's looking for that as well too. Sometimes there might be a bit of a disconnect, right? So making sure you guys are on the same page and they know what they want out of the project too. They're not just saying, I want an app redesign, giving you full range and then kind of giving you pushback on everything that you produce, right? So assessing the person that's looking for that would probably be the big thing. In terms of what sort of freelance projects are good, I would say something that's not going to be too big of an undertaking. And I know that's, again, pretty broad, but something that you can probably complete within a month or two, just so it's manageable. It's something that's a little more measurable. You're not feeling like it's just this massive project that's never going to end, something that you can start and complete, soon enough, and be able to start putting those on your portfolio as well. I think that's something that's important, is being able to showcase this work. But yeah, I think, in terms of what type, that's probably going to, depend on what your interest is. Some people might be interested in doing some UX research for some companies. And that's always a great outlet too, just reaching out to some, design agencies, other freelancers too, and just seeing if they have some stuff that they can shed, or some duties that they don't really enjoy. I'm sure there's some stuff, built into the roles that you guys wouldn't mind, letting go and letting other people do, right? So that's a good way, is just hitting up some more senior people or some design agencies and seeing if they have some stuff that they can shed. And again, getting back to the whole freelancing, it might be a while where you're building up and taking things that aren't preferable right off the bat to be able to build that credibility to start choosing what you want to work on a little bit more. But I'm sure you guys have some insights, so please feel free to, add on to that.
Greg, you want to add anything?
No, I thought that was actually very, very good coverage. So anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the main thing is, definitely making sure you don't take anything overly complex and having really clearly defined requirements in the beginning. Because when you're new to it, you might not know what the unexpected things that might come up that increase scope or take longer or cause a shift in direction. So making sure that the person you're working with or the stakeholders you're working with have a really clear definition of what they want from you or what you've signed up for, and make that really clear at the get-go, and not signing up for anything too complex. So something that you are somewhat familiar with, not like taking some like complex like biotech database interface when you have no experience in that domain, versus taking on something that would be a little bit more straightforward or that you can take on right off the bat. And again, like Greg said from the beginning, it's somewhat lonely, right? So, if taking stuff off another freelancer or some is much more helpful, because you're still in that learning phase. So you won't have your mentor or someone to bounce your ideas off of, or to make sure, things are on track, or what have you. So that can be a bit tricky as well.
Yeah, I guess the clarifier I would add on that to echo what everyone else said is freelance projects are really hard to do on your own. So if you can get a job where someone's going to be working with you, you'll have a much, much easier time. But sometimes that's a good way to really, get some of that experience, is just take a little project. So yeah. Any other questions that students have? And thank you, Rashmi, for asking that first one. Looks like probably not. So one thing that I know students a lot is what are good ways to prepare for an interview? And obviously, there's a lot of generic ones, but specifically for UX, what do you think are good things to do before that interview?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's probably a couple, I think two main components that you'd want to look at, right? And the first is, kind of the behavioral, the typical phone in-person interview stuff that you want to be prepared for, both those sort of behavioral and a little more in-depth UX questions. The other side would also be actually walking people through a project and be able to sort of defend some of the decisions, not like a thesis defense, but be able to walk them through, and people are probing, why did you do this versus why did you do that, being prepared on that. So in the first sense, the behavioral stuff, that's pretty straightforward, but still helps to be really prepared in terms of your goals, why you decided to make that career change into UX, and just having that really kind of built in, preparing your examples and making sure that those are really hitting home, and using things like the STAR method, other kind of structures, just keep it simple and make it really easy for the other person to digest. A lot of times, in these interviews, it's not so much about what we're saying, but just about how that's received too. So making sure that you're, controlling for, any kind of negative connotations of words, going through and just putting positive spins and good examples on that. But yeah, on the other end, I think a really important thing is just being comfortable with what you're walking people through on the project side. Maybe even walking through with someone who's a little more experienced so they can have a chance to kind of go through and give you some feedback, and also walk through with someone who doesn't know like a single thing about that, right? Just to make sure that they can understand too. Because if you've got a panel where it's half creative and half a little more, operational, you want to make sure that you can kind of, deal with both sides. You're not speaking too technical or too simple, kind of walking that fine line of balance in between. And, both parties are understanding and really seeing the impact that the project had. Did that answer the question kind of?
Yeah, I think that was great.
Awesome.
Carrie, anything you want to add to that of tips or good things to do?
Well, I mean, I think those are like, yeah, I guess you were asking more like specific to design, but yeah, there are just the general interview tips. But yeah, I do think also just sort of understanding like the thing we talked about at the beginning, like big company, small company, what interests you in design or what you want to do as a designer, right? So like, do you want to do, be a full stack and do everything, from, the research to the, fine-tuned visuals to maybe even a little coding, or do you want to focus in on one specific area like research or, information architecture or interaction design? Different companies or different job types have that. So I think another thing, is there's the preparing to make sure that you shine in whatever area that you want to do and what you want to focus on. And the other is understanding how the company works or how the team works to see if the job role covers that. Because oftentimes, especially at smaller companies or companies that don't understand UX UI, or it's an HR person writing the job description, they'll just put every single thing that they've ever heard about that someone can do in UX. And that might not actually be what the day-to-day job is or what you actually want to do. So also just sort of understanding what the real role would be like. So, and it looks like there's a question in the chat. So, hi, Calvin. Thank you for taking the time. So to answer questions, do you have any tips on how to create a portfolio for people that don't have any UX related design projects beside the capstone project? I've been trying to find projects I've worked on at work that may be related. Is that enough? What else could I do if I want to add more content to my portfolio?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm sure both of you guys have some, some suggestions too. So I'll just kind of run through and then definitely hop on. But yeah, obviously the capstone is the first and the prominent thing that we're going to put in there. The other thing, I'd recommend like doing a bit of an assessment of the mini projects that you've gone through in the course, right? And maybe go back and look at which ones you might see some opportunities to build on. Add some things on as well. That's really low hanging fruit because you've already done those assignments. So adding or building on that's going to be, a small part of it. And still that'll probably show, a bit of a range of skills. Capstone's going to show from start to finish. But being able to maybe show different parts of that a little more in depth is going to be really beneficial. Another thing, and, Karen and Greg, you may conflict with this, so please feel free to call me out. But, I often think even looking, if you're looking to find some placeholders or some things to put in your portfolio, maybe even just looking for tutorials online. So, whether that's UI, UX, tutorials in Sketch and putting your own spin on it, right? So not necessarily going through and doing the exact same idea, but understanding what they're trying to do in terms of the concept, whether it's like an app redesign, a website, what have you. And think of something else, like a totally different idea. You can still go through the structure, but you're putting your own spin on it. And again, that's something that you can kind of showcase, and it's not going to take you, 2 weeks or 3 weeks to put together. You can kind of whip a few of these things up and still show a different range of skills. But again, that may be a little off-site. So if that is, definitely call me out on that. But those would be two things I would think right away you can kind of start doing. And aside from that, maybe even just thinking about different projects, do like a smaller scale. You've had a chance to go through the capstone at this point, so you know how much of an undertaking it can be. Oftentimes people will take really ambitious projects and it takes them a bit longer than they expect. So this is your time to maybe chalk down, do something a little more straightforward and still show a range of skills on there. That's my tips. Feel free to jump on, or if you guys have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I could add is I guess it depends on how much time you have or wanted to spend. And if it sounds like you personally have a full-time job, but sometimes it's not going full board into freelancing. But if there are any like mini projects for friends, family, like they have a dentist office or they need a website redesign or something like that. If there are any like mini type freelancing projects that you can pick up just to build your portfolio that aren't too intense or too time consuming. Those are some other ways to help build a portfolio. And then that can be helpful too if it's something that's like actionable or actually built, but that can be a little bit more work to find those and to actually do the work. So, Greg, anything
last student questions? I didn't have anything to add to that. I thought that was a great sort of.
Cool. I think we may have time for one more question. I know there's been one that's been on my mind, just something that I've heard from some students, but I do want to open it up to any students who are here. If you do have any last questions for Calvin. One more question. Any sites from BJRM? Any sites, Calvin, that you would recommend for freelancing?
Yeah. There's a couple sites that, could be worth looking into. Again, it takes a bit of time to get some credibility because these sites, a lot of people value it based on the number of jobs you've done or the number of earnings you've made and that kind of stuff. But the first one, I think probably the most reputable one that I know is Upwork.com. So that's a freelance site. You can go on there and people are freelancing for, web development, marketing, UX, what have you, pretty much every kind of need on there. So you basically build a portfolio or profile. You can have a portfolio on there. And your services, and you try and market yourself, but it's a huge marketplace of sellers as well, right? So a lot of it's about differentiating yourself, getting some jobs under your belt, building that credibility on there. So that's one I would look at. Upwork, Freelancer. I think is it freelance or freelancer.com? I think it's freelancer.com. That's another one very similar to Upwork, almost like a competitor. Another one that's kind of gotten a little bit better. It used to be kind of corny back in the day, but Fiverr is getting up there to the point where it's not just $5 gigs. People are actually putting more professional ones on there. I saw some like web development redesign stuff for about $1,500. So people can still actually make money on there. That again, you create a gig and you try and market that versus like your whole portfolio or your profile. But those would be the three websites that I know of right now in terms of trying to find a gig. But again, it's very very noisy in there, a lot of competition, and a lot of people that have been there for a long time, right? So if you're looking to get into that, it does take a bit of time, and often taking jobs that are a little bit beneath you just to build up that credibility of, high rating, jobs taken, and the earnings on there, right? So that's a kind of small caveat with those sites. Just trying to think. Those are pretty much the three I know right now. I don't know if Carrie and Greg know of any others.
I don't think so. Those are the main ones. But yeah, I mean, and I do think I don't know if they have international people too, because sometimes the value or the price for the jobs are really bad. Like they want to pay you almost nothing to do something really big.
Oh, yeah.
So aside from the competition, there's also some very low paying jobs for a lot of work. So.
That might have to be the last one. As always, rush of great questions from students today. Thanks everybody for asking such astute questions. Huge thanks to you, Calvin, for taking the time out to share so much. Like I can't tell you how invaluable it is when you can come on and have this discussion. I think there's like so much that you share that can really help our students as they have to think through their next steps when they're looking to launch their career. So a huge thanks to you for being part of Office Hours again. You're the best, Calvin. Always great to see you. To our host mentors, Greg and Carrie, thank you as also some great questions and some great answers you gave today as well. Really appreciate it. Check us out next week. We have UX design alumni coming back to present our capstone project. Carrie, you may know this name. It's your former student, Morgan Nimmons.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, Morgan's wonderful. So I'm really excited to have her come and present her capstone. I know you were a very special mentor to her, Carrie, so huge shout out to you for all you did to help Morgan. And everybody come back again next week, same time, same place. Calvin, thank you again. Really appreciate it all. Bye, everybody.